Welcome to the August 6th State Board of Education meeting. I'm Glenda Ritz, Superintendent of Public Instruction. And as chair, we'll go ahead and begin with roll call.
Mr. Albert?
Present.
Mr. Ellsworth?
Present.
Dr. Freitas?
Present.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Ms. Beal?
Present.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Present.
Dr. Oliver?
Present.
Mr. Walker?
Present.
Mr. Watts? Mrs. Wicker?
Present.
Superintendent Ritz?
Present. If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the approval of the minutes, I have given you a fresh copy of the agenda. We are adding discussion items, waiver update, and school performance awards. And those have been added as I and J under discussion. We are removing a few items from the action. So we removed on your old agenda, we are removing H regarding adverse action petition between Edison and Gary, since they are still in negotiations. We are removing action item D, initiating rulemaking on accountability, because we already did that. And there's a date correction, and I believe it's corrected on your new copy. Action item L referred to the 2014-15 school year. It should be 13-14 school year. So that was corrected on your new one that you have. And then talking to David here right at the start of the meeting, if you could go also on your agenda, it would be A to F rules. It would be letter K on your new agenda. He wishes to remove that since the items are already listed. And then he also requested to remove letter M since we are already going to be having discussion regarding those items. Are there any other, and you'll notice on the new agenda, as I indicated in my email to you, that we were going to take a few items out of order in order to accommodate schedules. So we are going to have the best practices here, one of your first things that we'll be doing. And then, so that you know, we have several general comments today. Then under discussion, we're moving 2 items to discussion prior so that we can accommodate presenters who are here from CTV. So the assessment update will be first under discussion for work today, followed by board operating procedures, and then we'll begin our new action as indicated. Any other changes to the agenda? Andrea?
Could we maybe put the general comments before the best practices to give Adam a little extra time?
We could if you wish. So we'll do that.
I would like to make a change to the agenda. Propose a change. I would like to move the board operating procedures discussion, as well as item A under new business action ad hoc committee regarding the board procedures, to the last item on the action agenda. And the purpose of doing that is that I feel that before we address our board operating procedures, that we attend to the business of the State Board of Education and the important issues that are on the agenda already, and deal with the board operating procedures last.
That's normally where it would occur. I was trying to be sensitive to the resolution that was passed that really had asked for it to be done after roll call. but I'm amenable to moving it to the
I understand
end.
that our resolution from the prior meeting requested that it be first on the agenda, and I'd like to ask the board to consider moving it to the end of the action agenda.
I don't have any problem with moving that.
That's fine.
So we'll move item B under discussion, and A, action, and the B following that, operating procedures. There's 3 items on here for that. We'll move that all to the very end of the agenda. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Oh, yeah, I just want to clarify. I had intended that it be moved to the end of the action agenda, and I just want to make sure that that was your interpretation of that as well.
It wasn't. I was going to move it to the end of the whole agenda, so you want it to be at the end of action.
Yes.
Okay. Duly noted.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 I mean, not the minutes agenda, excuse me. All those opposed? Motion carries to approve the agenda. Next, we have the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. All right. Have just a couple of announcements, a few announcements that I would like to make. First of all, I am very proud that MSD Washington Township is one of 6 school districts in the world in which every single school has been International Baccalaureate authorized. It's quite an achievement. I will tell you all the other 6 school corporations that actually have that distinction of all of their schools being International Baccalaureate authorized, and that means elementary, middle school, and high school. All the other 5 are in the United States. So I just wanted to make that announcement. I began that process with them before taking my tenure here, and so I'm very excited that was accomplished. Waiver update, I have put at your table, your area, the Indiana congressional delegation all sent letters of support to Secretary Duncan, and I thought you should have a copy of those letters. We have not had any word regarding when that extension may be approved. ISTEP scores, again, I want to reiterate that there was an upward trend, again, in all subject areas and as a combination. And so it's one indicator of great success for our schools, and I guess I want to reiterate that. It's one indicator. We have a lot of great things going on in our schools that many times are not reflected actually in the test scores that we're looking at. I also wanted to let the board know that we're very busy at the department getting ready for school. And we have great bus driver training videos that I would urge you to go take a look at. We've been very active in doing some what we call video modules in a variety of areas at the department. And the Indy Channel's website is even hosting that in their back to school feature that they're doing. And then I also, along with starting school, safety is of prime importance, and it is at the department as well. We've got a lot of training and assistance. We assisted a lot of schools regarding school facilities, and I visited a lot of schools this summer, and the remake of some of their entryways, putting in more safety features, was very apparent. Board member comments and reports? Brad?
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. A quick question, if I could, and then I do have a comment. On the waiver, do we have a timeline yet from USDA when we might hear something?
We do not.
Okay, so at this point, we're
They
just kind of
just
waiting.
say, yeah. There's about 19 or 20 states that have had no word. There were like 31 that were in the same cycle of getting an extension.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a quick comment if
You
I could.
may.
It's good to be back with my colleagues on the board. During the month of July, I did have the honor of traveling with several Indiana educators to visit schools in the United Kingdom and Ireland. and I wanted to thank Ambassador Enterprises and the Summit of Fort Wayne for creating the Passport to Innovative Education program. It's only in its second year, but the program provides professional development to educators through a week-long symposium focused on leadership and character education, and in addition to the symposium, the Global Study Tour provides these same educators an opportunity to travel abroad where they can study education from a global perspective, and it was very interesting to hear the dialogue between what they're wrestling with here in Indiana and what's going on in the United Kingdom. Spending 10 days with some of our state's finest educators did a lot to renew my spirit and remind me of just how blessed we are here in Indiana, and every day dedicated professionals, including some on this board, ensure that our children have access to a quality education. And the educators I spent time with spoke very proudly of their students' accomplishments, as they should. Once again, Indiana students posted modest gains in academic achievement and continue to excel in a number of metrics used to monitor academic success. Today, many of these teachers have returned to their classrooms to begin yet another school year, and they're counting on us to complete work in several critical areas: implementation of new standards, the redesign of statewide assessments, modifications to Indiana's ADF accountability system, and hopefully improvements to Indiana's teacher evaluation system. And these represent only a handful of the policy considerations currently before the state board. Our students and our teachers have demonstrated the ability to make progress despite a number of challenges. And my hope is that the state board, working with the superintendent, can demonstrate similar progress through the creation of sound education policy. But for this to happen, there must be a shared understanding that our state's education system is a shared enterprise between the governor, the Indiana General Assembly, the State Board of Education, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Department of Education, and a variety of state agencies responsible for administrating and enacting Indiana's laws and policies that comprise our system of K-12 education. The importance of leadership in this process cannot be understated. We need leadership that values Indiana's approach to educational governance, leadership committed to student-centered policies that broaden access to quality education opportunities, leadership that respects the rule of law and avoids loose interpretations of existing precepts, leadership that is unselfish, inclusive, and open, leadership that places people before politics, attends to relationship before rhetoric, and demands excellence rather than accepting excuses. This is the kind of leadership our students deserve and our constituents expect, and this is the leadership that will result in progress.
Very good.
Any other comments? David?
This week, ISTEP scores were released, as you mentioned, Madam Superintendent, and I'd like to thank teachers, communities, school leaders, and so forth, and I see other people smiling and nodding that I think the whole board appreciates it. The data we received were the statewide scores, school scores, but I'm interested in how the ethnic groups did, and I'm asking whether or not we could receive disaggregated information for ethnic groups. I go back to the IRE 3 scores that we received a couple of months ago, and I was really impressed that in 1 year, Hispanics and African Americans increased by greater than 10% in 1 year on those IRE 3. So I'm really curious to see whether the ISTEP scores reflect that same kind of growth. And so I'm asking whether or not that's possible. And I have a question for the superintendent. Superintendent, how do you see the achievement gap in Indiana? How do you plan on addressing the achievement gap in Indiana?
Well, first of all, I'm going to let Michelle very quickly address your disaggregation information.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'd be glad to. We're actually in the process right now of creating those disaggregation spreadsheets, and so we'll be sure to push an email to you when they're ready. So it should be any day now.
Okay.
I'm glad you're interested in seeing it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Superintendent, how do you envision, what's your insights regarding the achievement gap in Indiana?
Well, we work with schools all over the state of Indiana, and our focus is going to be, and has been, on school improvement efforts that actually look at those. As you're aware, that every school does a school improvement plan, and one of the requirements that they have to do is to look at their scores and look at the subgroups according to that. In addition, our accountability system requires annual measurable objectives, and so the department works with schools to be sure that we are meeting those objectives, and if not, plans are put into place to address the achievement gaps. Those are solely with the work of the achievement gaps that we see within the individual school corporations and schools.
And how does the board participate in that? Do we get reports back over time of which schools are making progress in regard to achievement gap? How does that report back to the state board?
You want to make a comment on AMOs briefly? I don't know that there's a requirement or anything to report to the board on AMOs, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about the process.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning. It's very early. Annual measurable objectives are a component that's actually set up within our NCLB waiver. It is addressed by subgroup. There are specific goals that increment every year to address those performance gaps. As far as a mechanism for providing information back to the state board, I don't believe we have that defined at this point. The DOE does prepare that information on an annual basis, and the data is available through the DOE. So there certainly could be a mechanism defined for providing that information, but at this point I don't believe we have that requirement in place for bringing that information back.
I would ask as one member that that system be set up and that at our next board meeting we receive a memo describing that. I'm really pushing this because it is part of our strategic plan, the achievement gap, and I want to be sure we're following that. And I understand we're going to have a balanced scorecard and so forth and so on. I just want to be sure we don't lose that important issue so that every child in Indiana is receiving an education. I think that's really important.
Great. Michelle did also want to note, and good point, Michelle, that information is available on
Right.
Compass as well. DOE.in.gov Compass.
I guess what I'm looking for is something that comes to us automatically instead of us searching Compass for that. So thank you for agreeing to do that.
Dan?
David, I'd like to reinforce that working on the strategic plan, we need on the scorecard, we will need to know where the strategic priorities are on schools that are making, first of all, tremendous progress. I want to know what they're doing, and I want to make sure that's disseminated well. But we also, as a board, very much will commit on this balanced scorecard to measurements, and David's exactly right. We need a formatted system, and I think we're going to have a strategic planning oversight committee if we vote on this today successfully. And we will need that data organized in a way that we can chart progress. And then, Superintendent Ritz, you've had the data for a while. What's your observations on ISTEP? Where did we make particular progress? Did we have any problems? Did we have stagnation? What's your analysis?
Well, we've got improvement in language arts and also in mathematics. And we have the outreach is taking a look at each of the individual schools that they're responsible for in their regions. And so they're disaggregating out that information as they need to in order to, when they first have their meetings with their schools.
As you've looked at the bigger trends than each outreach coordinator, different levels of education, reading, what is your interpretation of what you see so far?
In the overall aggregate of information, we have an increase in language arts and an increase in math. I'm not sure what you're asking me about.
Like, have you seen anything with middle schools,
We're in the
grade
middle.
schools?
We're in the middle of disaggregating
So
out
you
that
haven't-
information
okay.
by outreach coordinators in their regions,
So at this
and
time, that's where
we're also looking at that very carefully, especially for the focus and priority schools. Any more comments? Yes, Gordon.
I'd just like to report back that my colleague from the 2nd District and I attended the New Member Institute for the National Association of State Boards of Education, and we interacted with the president of that organization in December, and I'd just like to report that it was an outstanding 3 days where we discussed best practices from across the country. We met with colleagues from Nebraska, Wyoming, New York, Virginia, Guam even. So it was a really outstanding 3 days, and I look forward to continued participation by this board with that organization. And I think that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Andrea, is your...
They're all here.
Are they all here? I think we'll just stay in order if you don't mind. So Andrea, I want to thank you for bringing the bicentennial information to the board And so I'll let you go ahead and introduce your guests. And
Thank
we'll
you so
proceed.
much, and for placing this early on the agenda. The Indiana Bicentennial offers K-12 schools an unprecedented opportunity to teach students about state heritage and Indiana's place in the larger American story. Unfortunately, only a handful of schools are in a position to take advantage of the opportunity beyond 4th grade when Indiana history is taught according to state standard. There is a state-approved high school elective called Indiana Studies, which combines history, culture, and politics. And this is an ideal place in a school's curriculum to study Indiana more thoughtfully than can occur in grade 4. From best I can tell, only a half dozen or so schools regularly offer this course to students. Bruce Blomberg sent me the email addresses of 24 teachers across the state who have taught this course, and I'm in the process of surveying them. My preliminary results suggest there are 3 reasons schools are reluctant to provide this class. 1 is budget, 2, not having proper curriculum materials, and 3, no incentive to offer it because of emphasis on subjects assessed by the state for accountability purposes. I'm hoping the state board might be able to do something about number 3 before the bicentennial gets here. Here today with us are John Herbst and Becky Schloman of the Indiana Historical Society, which is doing something very dramatic to address issue number 2. And then we will hear from Adam Williamson from Mississinawa High School, who does teach Indiana Studies. I thought it would be helpful to hear from someone in the field about why he teaches it and how it benefits his students. So Mr. Herbst and Ms. Schloman, if you'd come ahead, and then I have some materials to hand out when they are finished.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Superintendent Ritz and members of the board. As introduced, I'm John Herbst, President and CEO of the Indiana Historical Society. That is a nonprofit private membership organization, which is actually the oldest heritage organization in the state, founded in 1830. Our headquarters are Eugene and Marilyn Glick.
Mike, closer.
Take the mic up and touch. Thank you, sir.
Okay. The Eugene and Marilyn Glick Indiana History Center is located a block from here on West Ohio and West Streets. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you with my colleagues about encouraging Indiana studies in conjunction with the bicentennial. And in particular, we're going to speak to you about a new set of services from the IHS. In case you're not familiar with us, the core function of the Indiana Historical Society is to collect, preserve, and share archival materials related to Indiana and the Old Northwest Territory. So in our vast library there are materials that include original papers, letters, journals, business records, newspapers, maps, and almost 2 million historical photographs. Around the acquisition and care of these original materials, we share Indiana history in a variety of ways for many audiences across the state and out of the state. We publish 2 different magazines. We publish about 10 books a year on average. We direct the National History Day program in Indiana, a series of competitions that 5,000 students participate in annually, and we train and advise local historical societies, museums, historic sites on preserving and sharing history in their community. Most of them are volunteer or staff with 1 person. We appoint with the Historical Bureau a county historian for each of the 92 counties and work with them to be the voice of local history in their area. We have a membership of approximately 6,000 households, 70% of whom are in Indiana. Among our most valued constituents and most frequent users are teachers and students, and over the years we've produced many resources to help bring Indiana history into the classroom. I'm a former high school teacher myself, and over the last 40 years that I've been in public history, I've seen firsthand the value and the power of students understanding that history has actually been played out in their own backyards. We feel there's a very strong value in students, older students, becoming engaged with the history of their state before they go out and become voters and have to act as Hoosiers together and be engaged enough to be responsible citizens. Indiana is generally covered in the 4th or 5th grade, at which time students get some basic knowledge about Indiana geography, history, and cultural background that are suitable for elementary students,
cognitive level. So we are here today to bring your attention to an exciting new project from the Indiana Historical Society, Hoosiers and the American Story. By way of this project, by the way, this has been funded through the generosity of the Lilly Endowment. By way of this project, we have developed 320-page, full-color, beautifully illustrated textbook written by historian James Madison with Lee Sandweiss. And we're about to print 33,000 copies of this to be distributed free for use for students in grades 8 through 12 as a supplement to existing American history textbooks. We know that American history is being taught in these more senior levels, 8 through 12, and I'm going to pass this mock-up bound copy of the book. It doesn't have its index, and it will have a hard cover when we publish it, and we are going to leave the first chapter of this book, copies of that with you, to give you an example of how the book is organized. But in the book, we have done all the work for assignments and tests and field trips and other resources that can be consulted by the students and the teachers. And we will be giving this, as I said, away for free beginning in November of this year.
Thank you very much for sharing that, and I just want to say that I was privileged to have supported this early on when you brought the prototype to me, and I so appreciate the primary sources that are offered through your organization.
Throughout the book, we're using primary sources from our collection and other repositories in the state to illustrate the different topics. And basically what this does, it provides Indiana examples for any topic that's being studied in these upper grades in U.S. history, such as colonization, Native Americans, westward expansion, the Civil War, transportation, industrialization, immigration, race relations, and civil rights. I mean, anything you'd be studying in American history, there are Indiana examples for this. And because textbooks, commercially published textbooks, are coming really out to please states that do statewide adoptions, like Texas and California and others, there's a lot of examples from those states, and very, very few examples from the Hoosier state. So to tell you more about the book and the 16 regional teacher training workshops that we're going to hold around the state over the next 3 years, I want to introduce Becky Schloman, who is the Bicentennial Programs Coordinator at the Historical Society.
John, may I
Yes,
say
please.
something while you're up
Yes,
there,
sir.
not to embarrass you? I want to publicly thank you for your leadership. I've watched you over the years in the community, and what you've done in your present role is just really impressive. And the service you give the state and the teachers, I admire your work.
Thank you very much.
And I also, it's a good time to probably publicly thank the donors, the Glick family, endowment. You've had so many over the years. A lot of people don't recognize the importance of this. You'll be able to draw them in. Then one other thing off the top of my head, and I'll have to check it out, and maybe the board staff could look into it. Maybe we ought to have one of our meetings at the Historical Society as we, if it works out. I don't
Yes.
know if you have a place and how that would be, but it might be a good way to highlight what you're doing with the bicentennial and all. And maybe we could even have a discussion of this wonderful book, or
Yes,
maybe
we-
different board members could bring. No, Andrew will be trump us all because she'll come in guns blazing. But it might be nice if we had a copy and could read through it and maybe point out, or maybe a couple brief sessions, put a time on it, but it'd be interesting. But your work's excellent. I just thought this public forum would be a good place to recognize,
Dan.
John,
Thank
all
you
you
very
do.
much. And you are very welcome to come. We have a meeting room about this size that we would be glad to offer to you. So please come and take advantage of that. Great. Becky?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, John. Again, my name is Becky Schloman. I work in the Education and Community Engagement Department at the Indiana Historical Society as coordinator of bicentennial programs. I am proud to say that I am a former teacher like John. I spent many years in the classroom teaching middle school and high school both, in both public and private schools, most recently at Warren Central High School on the east side here in Indianapolis. I also have some experience designing professional development for teachers, and that's at the heart of what I do at IHS. As John mentioned, I am organizing a series of teacher workshops around the state, beginning this November and running through the end of 2016. Right now, we've got 11 on the calendar, with possibly more to come. Our goal with these workshops is to give particularly U.S. history teachers the tools that they need to integrate Indiana history into their curriculum, so that when they are teaching those standards about westward expansion or the Civil War and those sets of topics that John mentioned, they have some Indiana examples of those national themes and stories. We know that kids sometimes tend to think of history as this thing that happens to other people in other places, and we want to really support the message that American history was also happening and continues to happen right here in our own backyard. As a result, we hope that students will feel a greater sense of civic responsibility, particularly as they reach voting age in high school. We believe that learning about Indiana is an important step towards being invested in Indiana, and that young people who care about their home are more likely to be good stewards of that home as they grow up. To that end, we are going to be presenting teachers with a lot of great resources for teaching state history and a little bit of local history as well. John told you about our book, Hoosiers in the American Story. This is a supplemental student text. It's not intended to replace a U.S. history textbook. And it provides Indiana examples of the U.S. history standards. It is aligned with both the old social studies standards and then the new ones that just came out in March. Bruce Blomberg and the DOE and Superintendent Ritz have been so wonderful about helping us with this project. We also worked with a focus group of social studies teachers from around the state who were instrumental in making it happen. One of the book's co-authors, Jim Madison, will give the keynote at these workshops. And if you don't know Jim Madison, he is kind of a rock star in the Indiana history world. He actually has groupies that follow him around and go to all of his speeches. So that will be a big draw for teachers. We are printing 33,000 copies of the book, and they will all be free for schools. Teachers who attend the workshops will get one copy to take with them right then, and then they'll be able to order however many they need to be shipped to their school later. There will also be a free PDF version of that book available online. Also at the workshops, we will have a session on Destination Indiana for the classroom. Destination Indiana is what we like to call a time travel exhibit at the IHS. It consists of 300 plus journeys. Each journey is like a digitized slideshow of photos and other images taken from our collections, usually around 10 to 12 images each, with both audio and written narration to accompany the slideshow. Each journey has a theme, so there are journeys about all of Indiana's 92 counties, and then there are also journeys that are about topics relevant to the entire state, like Indiana colleges and universities and railroads. Right now, Destination Indiana is available only in our building, but we're in the process of turning it into a website so that it can be used in schools. The web version will also have some added functionality so that students can more easily access our online collections and create journeys of their own. We had some teachers in our building a couple weeks ago give us some feedback about that design, and they were so positive and excited about it. At our first workshops, which are happening this November, the website should be ready for alpha testing, which means that the teachers there will actually get to test it. They'll be able to participate in development of the site, and then the finished product should be ready around mid-November, so hopefully in time for folks to plan second semester over their break. At the workshops, we will also have information about how teachers can participate in National History Day in Indiana. As John said, that is a program for grades 4 through 12 where students explore their own interests in history, they conduct research, and they create projects about what they've learned. We will also have guest presenters from other history organizations, including statewide groups like Indiana Humanities and the Indiana State Library, and then also local organizations like the Fort Wayne History Center and the Jefferson County Historical Society. These organizations will be able to present teachers with some of the education resources that they offer. So lots of resources for teaching state and local history, plus there'll be time for teachers to collaborate and lesson plan with each other. Again, our first 3 workshops are happening this November. This year they are happening here in Indianapolis, in Fort Wayne, and in Madison. Each workshop is identical at the moment, and they're each a day long. Over the course of the next 3 years, we hope to reach up to 1,500 teachers with the workshops and to hold them all around the state so that they're accessible to everyone. Our target audience is 8th through 12th grade U.S. history teachers, but I've been surprised and delighted that we've had a great reaction from teachers across the K-12 spectrum and in many different subject areas, including English language arts, 4th grade, generalists. We've had several media specialists who are already registered, and I know that both Adam, who's going to speak to you in a moment, and Andrea are already registered. Because best practices in professional development tell us that teachers succeed when their learning is ongoing and collaborative, we're also following up the workshops with some online ways for teachers to connect with each other about teaching state history, including a Facebook group, some work with ICSS, which is the professional organization for Indiana social studies teachers, a revamp of the education portion of the IHS website, a presence on the classroom management website, My Big Campus, and much more. One of the very best parts of these workshops is that they are totally free for teachers. There is no registration fee. Teachers will get a small travel stipend, and we're going to pay for subs, which is pretty big. Again, Hoosiers in the American Story will be totally free for schools, and we are printing many thousands of copies of that. It's my job to get them all into student hands over the next 2 years, so I'm hoping that schools will order a lot of them. All of this is being funded by a very generous grant from the Lilly Endowment, and we are super grateful for their support. That is a fast overview of some of the ways that the IHS is bringing the bicentennial to schools. We do have many other bicentennial programs happening in the building. These are just the ones that I work on. And I'd like to quickly tell you about the items that we're going to give you in some folders, which Andrea will hand out to you. You will all get one of these. On this side, we have some information about educator membership at the Historical Society. That's that handout right there. You will get an educator resource guide. This is last year's ERG, but the new one is coming very soon. It has information about all of the educational programs that we have to offer at IHS. You will get a postcard about the Bicentennial Train, which is a 200-foot 3-train car traveling exhibit of photography spanning the 200 years of Indiana state history. You have information about Growing Little Leaves, which is our genealogy program for kids. And then you have some documents about National History Day, which I've already spoken about. On this side is all the stuff about the bicentennial. So in the back, there's a little handout about all of the bicentennial programs around IHS. This handout is a fairly in-depth description of the workshops that I just told you about, and then this is the important piece for me. This is a postcard about my workshops. Please give it to your favorite teacher. I need people to sign up. That was my plug. Andrea is also handing out the first chapter of Hoosiers in the American Story so that you can see how that is structured. And then finally in that folder you also have my business card. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you more about what we're doing. I think that we at the IHS and our partner organizations have created some really cool resources for teaching state and local history. I cannot wait to work with teachers around the state and to be part of the conversation that our students are going to be having about the bicentennial. Thank you.
Educators are getting excited, and I know Bruce is getting the word out, and we'll be putting more things out in the DOE dialogue, and I thoroughly enjoyed History Day. That was so fun.
Thank you for coming.
So thank you so much.
Adam?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Adam Williamson. I'm a social studies teacher. I'd like to thank the State Board for listening to my remarks this morning and member Andrea Neal for inviting me today. I teach at Mississinawa Community Schools in Gas City. I was hired in 2007, and after serving 4 years at our middle school, I was hired to teach advanced placement United States history at Mississinawa High School in 2011. In the summer of 2012, I was informed that it would be my responsibility to teach Indiana Studies. Now, while I'm a pure-blooded Hoosier, I was born in Indiana, educated in Indiana public schools, I went to Ball State University, I found myself a bit unprepared to teach Indiana Studies. You see, I had a hard time determining what was supposed to be included in the course. I could locate no state standards for the course. The previous Indiana Studies teacher had left me little resources to work with on that topic. My online searches bore little fruit. It seems that few Indiana Studies teachers were web savvy. So I relied on our high school's course description, a few applicable state standards from 4th grade, U.S. history, U.S. government, and some advice from the fellows in my four-man department to stumble through teaching Indiana Studies that first year. I began collecting articles, sifting through book collections to draw out interesting resources, but beyond Professor James Madison's book, The Indiana Way, and Ralph Gray's Indiana History Book of Readings, comprehensive sources were few and often dated. I gradually realized that a hazy curriculum map also had some advantages. I used it like an ace up my sleeve to request field trips from our central office. And my students seemed to thrive on those field trips. They feasted upon all the on-site opportunities our state offers, visiting Conner Prairie, traveling to the 1812 Festival, visiting our county's own landmarks, or taking a Saturday trip to Vincennes. Those were without a doubt the experiences that my students enjoyed the most. Now, we have to choose our destinations carefully. Even the most liberal school travel budget can't support endless field trips, but they're enough to attract 20 or so students to the course every year. Yet, far too many students miss out on what a good Indiana Studies course can offer. The typical Indiana Studies student is an average achiever, often without much direction, very often unsure of his or her future plans. You see, few of our college-bound or honors students take Indiana Studies. With the national push toward advanced placement, dual credit, college preparatory classes, few students can find room in their schedules for electives. And unfortunately, Indiana Studies has a difficult time competing with foreign language, band, or choir, other electives which qualify for Indiana's academic honors diploma. So our school considers Indiana Studies of value, and it offers it every year, but the course certainly doesn't make our list of perhaps the most valuable courses our honor students can take. With the increasing emphasis on STEM education, social studies are quickly becoming de-emphasized. Many students are loading up on math, science, and English courses, and they're not spending much time on social studies beyond those courses required by the state. Our geography and history of the world courses, U.S. history, U.S. government courses, they're often filled to capacity, but electives like sociology, Indiana Studies, civics, those are suffering from dwindling enrollment numbers. At a time when the Indiana Civic Health Index reveals that Indiana's voter turnout dipped to 48th in the nation and our voter registration hovers at 43rd, I find that deeply troubling. Indiana needs to make an effort to attract its brightest young mind back to the social studies. We need to make the next generation offer up its best leaders, its most noble and dedicated minds to serve in our elected positions. We need to convince a generation of young Hoosiers, far too many of whom I've encountered, who are cynical, distrustful of government, and skeptical of the greatness of our Hoosier legacy, that service to this state is worthy and is honorable. Now, we can change that course. Many principals might give Indiana Studies and civics and other electives a second look if greater emphasis were placed on the social studies by the state board. A set of standards for Indiana Studies might provide direction to teachers assigned to the course. If they could easily locate and provide classroom resources, such as this new book I'm very excited about, The Hoosiers and the American Story, or be presented with significantly reduced cost access to state sites, they may become a little less frustrated when planning instruction. Now, students who are scheduling their courses look for incentive. Indiana Studies kind of has a generic sounding name, so you need a hook to get students interested. And field trips are a great way to do it. Many schools and many more parents can't afford to send students all over the state, but these educational experiences are simply too valuable to neglect. Is there a way that the state board could find a way, that the DOE perhaps could find a way to support field trips for Indiana Studies courses, for social studies courses in Indiana history? Could state organizations perhaps be interested in providing some sort of assistance to Indiana Studies classes? Our state's bicentennial presents an excellent opportunity to encourage schools and students to celebrate our heritage. I hope the state board encourages schools and teachers to connect with the Indiana Bicentennial Commission, perhaps to propose ideas for the Bicentennial Legacy projects, as I plan to do with my course. I hope the board considers ways to recognize and encourage those students who embrace the social studies and prepare to lead our state on a path to greater destiny. I hope you take advantage of the opportunity provided by the bicentennial to further support social studies education and elevate it to the position of prominence it desperately deserves. Together, we can bequeath our Hoosier legacy to our students. I thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you very much. Andrea, did you want to add any final comment?
No, I haven't met Adam, but I wish I could take your course. That was wonderful.
I'd just like to add, I want to thank Andrea for taking the time to present this to us, and I'm really excited about this book as somebody who's interested in Indiana history. If anyone has not read James Madison's book on Eli Lilly, you have to. It's a must-read for any Hoosier. But I'm really excited about this book, and I think it's going to do a lot for focusing our kids on civic education and Indiana history. So I want to thank you. And I've also been reading Andrea's columns on the canals and limestone and other aspects of Indiana history that she's been submitting to the newspapers, which have been really interesting. So thank you for your dedication to this.
Carrie?
And sometimes we forget, when we talk about the language arts teacher, and I'm a language arts teacher, but, we can tie in so much, and, even the comment on, primary sources, and those are things that are in my class syllabus. And so, we need to try to take some opportunities to tie those things in and not just separate, this is a social studies class and this is a language arts class, but, work together and read some of these things in language arts class and really cross-tie things.
All right. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation. We're ready for general public comment, and we have several here today. So I'm first going to call Michael Chisley. Not sure I pronounced that correctly. And I believe general comment has 3 minutes. Welcome, Michael.
Madam Superintendent, board members, you said it right, Chisley. I've been called worse. Right. My name is Michael Chisley. I'm a retired administrator who is also the past president of the Indianapolis Alliance of Black School Educators, which is an affiliate of the National Alliance of Black School Educators. Our constituents represent educators from the university to the elementary. We also represent educators who work in public, private, parochial, and charter schools. I'm here to address some concerns that we at IAPSE are really paying a lot of attention to. First, we'd like to bring to your attention that we like to make sure that equitable policies are in place for all students. Those policies being based on expulsions and suspensions. There has been a history over the years in Indiana that there's been a disproportionate number of African American students and brown students that are being suspended. That leads to next section, which would be cultural responsiveness. I was glad to hear about the Indiana history and how that's going to be incorporated, but we also like to see cultural responsiveness based in the curriculum, staff development, and instruction. One of the things as far as history is concerned, we hope that those things are representative of what the contributions of African Americans have done in the state of Indiana also. Also, we like to see a positive school climate. Schools should be safe and nurturing. One of our concerns is that we want to make sure that profits are not put before the children. Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, in his writing Good to Great, and his follow-up Good to Great in the social sector states, for social sector organizations, performance must be assessed relative to the mission, not financial returns. The critical question is not how much money do we make per dollar of investment capital, but how effectively do we deliver our mission and make distinctive impact relative to the resources. We also like to make sure that evaluations or accountability is based on effective school data and monitoring of those schools throughout the state to make sure that they're following the best practices. I want to thank the board and the superintendent for this time to speak in front of you, and thank you for what you do for the students of Indiana.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Dan?
When we convene our task force looking at state intervention in chronically failing schools, we'll want to interact with you further and get information and start a dialogue so you can share insights. We have a task force. The next few months going to take a serious look at this. Sounds like you've done some important work and have some frameworks and data points we'll want to interact with you on. So we'll reach out, but please stay in touch. I'm chairing that subcommittee of the board.
Okay.
And so we'll want to have further discussion with you, okay?
We gratefully
Thank you.
appreciate that and look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Erica Haskins?
Good morning, Superintendent Ritz and members of the board.
Good morning.
I'd really like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'm really excited. Like Superintendent Ritz said, my name is Erica Haskins. I serve as an educator and a building administrator. I'm here today representing a teacher advisory board formed by the Institute of Quality Education to introduce an idea that would let our group, under guidance from IQE, be leaders in the initiative to launch a positive messaging and positive outreach campaign expressed by your strategic plan that was adopted July 9th. Our vision right now is set on the creation of an educator ambassador program that would place our most effective teacher leaders in positions to message the value of the teaching profession in a positive way. We can think of no window of opportunity greater than this to connect the voices of our most positive and inspiring educational leaders with teachers that are seeking to be heard, supported, professionally challenged, and valued by their peers, their principals, their district, and their board. The potential exists for the Educator Ambassador Program to build great momentum behind professional rigor and recognition in the teaching profession, as well as to build a retention structure for our top performing talent in Indiana schools. An ambassador program led by our Teacher Advisory Board will begin the much needed constructive dialogue that really unveils what teachers do when they're at their very best and will empower them to continue to do so. We consider teachers not just recipients and implementers of the field's knowledge, but as the creators and owners of it. They're problem solvers, they're entrepreneurs, they are generators of professional insight. Teachers, most importantly, are intellectuals, and we want our educator ambassadors to message this, to reach out with this message every single day throughout the entire state. We recognize the importance that Objective 2.1.7 set forth by your strategic plan be met, so we offer our full support to lead such an ambassador program. Again, because of the tremendous opportunity we see at hand to connect Indiana teachers to one another in celebration and genuine acknowledgement of their profession, and also to connect them to you, their board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brad?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Erica. I love the concept. What's interesting, of course, the timing of you talking about this is just having come back from that trip I mentioned in my opening comments. Being able to spend time with 23 or 24 of our educators and getting to connect with them personally, I found extremely important. And as I think about the work we do, particularly on the Strategic Planning Committee, I see a real benefit to having something like this, especially if you're thinking about being representative of ambassadors, being teachers all over the state somehow in an organized way. So I would just say, I would love for us to look at this further. I don't know if you could get with Bob or get with the superintendent, but I certainly would lend my support to something like this to look at it so that the board could maybe take some action on this at some point to formalize this, particularly as we get going on strategic planning. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but having done strategic planning, it really, really helps to have that teacher voice, and this last month just reminded me of that. So thank you. Your comments are very timely.
Thank you. EJ?
If I could piggyback on what Brad said there, I compliment you in putting this together. It's exciting. I think, in my opinion, the most valuable tool teachers have is professional conversation. And when you bring those top-level educators together, that disperses throughout corporations and throughout buildings. And this is something I'd love to be involved in, and I applaud you. Thank you.
David?
Concept's terrific, and sitting through many strategic planning meetings, I always wonder whether or not that document's going to go on the shelf and we'll never see it again. And I believe you're the first person who has come forward to say, within our strategic plan, and you actually read it, you quoted a particular section, and in taking that concept and now applying it is really exciting. It affirms the work that many people did, chaired by my colleague Dan Elsner, and it's really gratifying. I'd be willing as one member to be a liaison maybe with Bob and to really spearhead this. So I would ask that you get with Bob sometime maybe at the break, and I'd be willing to spearhead any initiative with this that you and Bob see fit, and bring it back to our colleagues with some specific recommendations.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Eric, may I make one more comment?
Sure.
Eric, I would like to know what you need in terms of helping this organization go from the board or in my other life with university and faculty, et cetera, because some of the themes you brought out today, really I've been on this board 10 years, it's probably too long, but the teachers are the intellectuals, and they're not only, receivers of do this, they're the creators, and all your themes are just, it was outstanding presentation, but we have to find ways to support this, because at the end of the day, that's leadership, that's collaboration, that's bringing people together, and I love it connected to the strategic plan, and I just want to encourage you, and I want to know from you, this board member, but I think the whole board, I can speak, we want to know what you need to build this up. And to create the momentum and places, resources, et cetera. This is the kind of investment that's worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anthony Beverly? Good morning.
Thank you all for this opportunity to come and speak before you all today, Superintendent Ritz and the rest of the board. My name is Anthony Beverly with Stop the Violence Indianapolis. The name should speak for itself. On behalf of our organization, we thank you and for the love and care that you have for our youth and our families and our communities. So we want to thank you for the work and things that you're doing to help enhance education and opportunities for our youth and families. I'm here today to address some of the issues around turnaround schools and turnaround operators, and some of the issues that we've seen ourselves in dealing with a lot of these schools and a lot of the students at some of these schools. We know that they have not demonstrated a significant improvement in outcomes, although we do hear that they've said that they've had some increases, but not significant. We want the state must ensure that each turnaround operator shows significant evidence and success of our schools and our families that go to these schools. We believe the management contracts and the performances evaluations for these management companies do not contain the necessary elements for significant student improvement. We know that the enrollment for each school does not compare in terms of the students who attend those schools now. And in some cases, 2/3 of the students no longer attend those schools, which brings into question how valid are the reports that we're getting. Our children and family can no longer accept another year of pathetic accountability for implementation and best practices for students in our schools that is comprised mostly of students who have experienced academic failure, who are in most cases young black boys, who are mostly from low-income families. This really sounds like a civil rights issue. Therefore, we strongly recommend the following elements become part of the management contracts and performance evaluations and embedded into the work that this new turnaround accountability team is looking at. and the gentleman before me went over some of those things, and I want to add to it. Equitable policies. I personally have dealt with a few of these kids that have gone to some of these turnaround schools that have been pushed out. They live a few blocks away, but choose to go to other schools because of the high suspensions over petty issues that are not even criminal. Cultural responsiveness. Our organization just came back from a trip, an East Coast trip, where we took 9 black boys to the East Coast. They were able to go and experience the Black Wax Museum. And at the Black Wax Museum, they were able to see their culture, their history, and just like the guy with the Indiana Historic Institute said, they were very excited to learn about themselves, which they're not getting into the schools, which may be part of the reason why they're not doing as well.
Anthony, your time is up, but if you want to make a final comment, that would be fine.
Oh, that was quick. Okay.
Sorry, yeah,
Thank
3
you.
minutes
Well,
goes a lot faster than you think.
Yeah, it does.
So sorry.
So the cultural awareness, early warning signs, you know, putting some of those things into play would definitely help, you know, our kids do better in school. And then the community involvement piece, where we've assembled a coalition, a team, to help these schools out so that our students can do better and put those support systems in place that are not there. And we've even been pushed out. We've come together as a community and we've been pushed out. So we got to put things in place where we have the community school models that work.
And we welcome your input, and be sure to put it in writing, and we'll bring that to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Patricia Payne. Hi, Pat.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the State Board of Education and CECI. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts and concerns. I am Patricia Payne. I am a lifelong resident of Indianapolis, a concerned citizen, recently retired educator, and an educational consultant specializing in multicultural education and cultural competency training. I join my colleagues this morning in expressing concern over what we feel is a lack of public accountability and oversight for turnaround school operators. I asked that you strongly consider requiring contracted companies to be transparent in their reporting procedures and their responses to legitimate inquiries about policies and performance data affecting, in particular, students of color and low-income students. It is critical, I believe, to include the following components in contracts and performance evaluations of turnaround management companies. 1, discipline policies that are fair, equitable, and devoid of exclusionary discipline mechanisms that interrupt classroom instruction, and discipline data that is disaggregated by race and gender. 2, schools that are guided by culturally responsive beliefs, practices, services, resources, programs, professional development, and personnel who are able to accurately assess and address academic and behavioral student performance. 3, realistic annual performance goals that require high expectations, a positive school climate, and college and career readiness strategies. And 4, early warning and intervention systems that utilize research-based best practices as opposed to deficit-minded approaches and assumptions. I made it in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very, very much. I want to also add that I have just retired after 52 years with my school district.
Thank you.
And I am so, thank you. I didn't say that, but I do want you to know that the reason that I stayed there that long is because of my concern for the issues that I have shared with you this morning. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you very much, Pat. Elizabeth Gore. Elizabeth Gore.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am Elizabeth Gore. Oh, I forget that I'm one of the tallest people here. I am the education chairperson for the Concerned Clergy. I would like to thank each of you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thanks to each of you for your sincere commitment to education. I do understand that when you get up early in the morning and sit on boards, that you care about what you're doing, and we do appreciate that. Because I feel that all children deserve a quality education, I would like to comment on our turnaround schools. As we have seen in the last few weeks and days, there has been some gain shown in our I-STEP test results. We need to show significant gain in these schools because this is a crucial situation to our communities. The children most affected by this disruptive process have been children of color and children of low-income families. I feel the state has embarked on a process for school turnaround that has not, at this time, shown significant evidences of success for low-performing schools. We know that the enrollments for each of the schools at this time do not compare in terms of who attends those schools. So thus, sometimes the reporting of scores becomes invalid because 2/3 of those students are not there. The Indianapolis community, who trusted the state for change, can no longer accept another year of weak accountability for implementation of best practices for student success in schools where most of the students have experienced years of failure, who are mostly African American. I, too, am asking that some elements be part of the management contracts and performance evaluation and embedded in the work of the new turnaround accountability team. Equitable policies, which includes an elimination of exclusionary discipline policies that exclude students from the high quality instruction of regular classroom. And one of the most important things is that they are not expelled for non-criminal student misbehaviors. Another one, cultural responsiveness. I was glad to hear about the history this morning, but including our history and contributions of the major ethnic groups of student populations, instruction assessments, professional development, teacher evaluation, and leadership evaluation. High annual performance goals that result in college and career readiness with appropriate support. Extensive integrated community services and community engagement aligned with school data and the school improvement plan. Public accountability and oversight with the same data reporting requirements of other public schools. I'd like to thank you this morning for your time and thank you for the work that you do with our schools.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Kuala Murtada.
Good Good morning.
Good morning.
I deeply appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. And like the others before me who are deeply concerned about what's happening with African American and Latino and low-income children broadly that are located within our turnaround schools, we have some very serious concerns. I'm representing the Education Council of the National Council of Negro Women. We study the data nationally and locally. As a part of our commitment to our community, what we find is that as active members of our community, we are hearing more and more concerns about the following schools that are labeled as turnaround schools: Howell, Emma Donnan, Arlington, Manual, because they have demonstrated little to no significant improvement. Are there monitoring policies, rigorous annual reports that are made public so that our larger public can be aware of the issues that are concerned? I have a series of questions to ask rather than a number of recommendations to make, and one specific recommendation. What are the specific policies that address discipline? This is important because many students are being punished through suspensions for different acts, and there is a category that says other, and far too often, other is the category that's checked on the disciplinary policy. How is the larger community engaged? We want families and community members to know that the schools are theirs. With public funding, we deserve to know much more, and that information needs to be much more public and made aware for members of our larger community. In short, what form of public accountability and oversight is required in line with that required of all of our schools? Determining the effects of turnaround schools' success or failure is far more complex than what appears on the surface. For example, research indicates that schools in very disadvantaged neighborhoods are likely to have the least qualified teachers. I want to repeat that. They're likely to have the least qualified teachers for those schools that are in disadvantaged neighborhoods. An impact assessment is clearly called for that is made public and considers the following. Are the schools doing an effective job of implementing a model that's purported to actually turn around the academic achievement? This is a matter of fidelity of model. For example, if there is a design that was submitted to the oversight body, any form of curriculum and instruction innovation should actually be in place. Innovation is supposed to be the purpose. If so, how is innovation being addressed as a part of academic growth? Is there a careful tracking and reduction of disciplinary referrals and attendance reported by gender and ethnicity and specificity and description? If so, there apparently are disproportionality issues that must be addressed. Are there positive behavioral interventions and supports that are in place? And is there a tracking of the effects of positive behavioral interventions and supports? Because if they're not effective, why aren't they in place? How are the turnaround schools being monitored as to the best practices for the conditions for learning? We know what those conditions for learning are. Leadership makes a difference. A curriculum of meaning and rigor that taps into the funds of knowledge and cultural engagement of young people makes a difference. Teacher excellence makes a difference. Family and community engagement makes a difference. How are these conditions of learning being carefully accounted for? And the most urgent question, how will the department and the public know about the oversight as well as the net effect, both academically and fiscally, of high implementation of the turnaround models? Because the money is being allocated, how is it best being allocated, and is there fiscal responsibility herein? Again, thank you for this opportunity to share our concerns and the recommendation that an impact assessment for accountability purposes be conducted immediately and shared with the larger public. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Pat Rogan.
Good morning, Superintendent Ritz, board members. My name is Pat Rogan. I serve as the Executive Associate Dean of the School of Ed at IUPUI. I've been an educator for the past 36 years, with most of these years spent in urban education. Our School of Ed focuses on urban teaching, research, and service. We immerse our students in more clinical practice hours than any other teacher education program in the state, and we graduate highly qualified teachers, including the nationally recognized Woodrow Wilson Fellows, teachers with dual certification in special education and English as a second language, and reading endorsements. And we also prepare exemplary school leaders and school counselors. We work in schools and community organizations using a university, school, community collaboration approach. And we practice and promote full-service community schools while addressing social justice issues. For example, our Reading and Writing project, funded by the Indiana Commission for Higher Education, provides professional development focused on the effective teaching of reading and writing in Indianapolis public school classrooms. Schools involved in this ongoing project have steadily improved their I-STEP scores in language arts. Our K-12 professional development program, which focuses on preparing every classroom teacher to work effectively with English language learners, has also been credited in 2 of the state's largest I-STEP gains. I provide this information to reiterate our commitment to be part of the solution as we address our complex issues in urban schools and communities, and to emphasize a P20 cradle-to-career, cross-sector, collective impact approach with a sense of urgency. We have provided a report to the community with disaggregated data per your question, and would be happy to submit those recent annual reports about the performance in our central Indiana area. But today I wish to highlight national data regarding school turnaround efforts to complement the comments that have been made thus far. A study published in 2005 by the Education Commission of the States on state takeovers of schools and districts noted that takeovers, quote, have yet to produce dramatic, consistent increases in student performance. A 2007 study by the RAND Corporation examined the Philadelphia experience with takeover and restructuring. Student data from 45 of the city's lowest performing schools that were turned over to a group of 7 private managers found that the privately managed schools showed no positive effects in reading or math in the 4 years following takeover. The 2014 report from Stanford Center for Research on Education Outcomes, or CREDO, noted that charter management organization CMO performance records are mixed. According to CREDO, CMOs taken as a whole have about the same performance as the traditional public schools with which they coexist. Given this national data and the fact that admittedly it is incomplete and requires much deeper scrutiny, it's imperative that our Indianapolis turnaround efforts adhere to the highest accountability measures as offered by the speakers thus far. All of the board members have received the recommendations from the coalition members who are here today. Our School of Education and our Center for Urban and Multicultural Ed, our Great Lakes Equity Center that works with the U.S. Department of Justice and Office of Civil Rights, and our Central Indiana Education Alliance, as well as our coalition members, stand ready to assist the Turnaround Committee with research, data, and effective practices as we work together with a sense of urgency to ensure all students have access to a high-quality education. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and for the work you do.
Thank you, Pat. Carol Craig will be our last speaker for general comments.
Good morning, Superintendent Ritz and board members. I am Carol Craig, retired administrator, and today I'm representing the Greater Indianapolis NAACP. We thank you for this opportunity, and we also thank you for the great work that you do under this complex issue of school education, so we want to thank you. Today we're speaking, as you have heard, regarding the turnaround process. And I want to reiterate that we are not here to attack the turnaround operators nor the school leadership. Rather, this is a deeper concern regarding the existing process that leads quite questionable whether or not this process is producing the desired results that were desired by our legislators and by our taxpayers. I thank you for now embarking on a tighter and more in-depth oversight of the turnaround process through the formation of some type of committee or evaluation team that will produce thoughtful, research-based recommendations. We are asking that our voices be heard upon the onset of this committee's work. If we look at what we know, you've already heard that we're quite aware that 2/3 of the students in these schools no longer attend those schools, so that makes quite questionable any data that comes out with regard to test scores. We also know that there's been high leadership turnover with those 4 schools. All the principals are new. The same is also true for the children. We know in several cases the staff turnover has been extremely high, which is the same as it was for the children in the schools that they attended prior to the takeover. We know that there is high student mobility. In addition, we know that based upon student enrollment, as you've just heard, the suspension rates for these schools are extremely high. With some data we just produced, we realized that in the 219 schools for Marion County, the suspension rates for these 4 turnover schools were in the top 7. Also, in terms of expulsion, one of the 4 schools had an expulsion rate of 26% for the 11-12 school year, whereas IPS had an 11% expulsion rate. We talk about crime and then the children that are in the street, and we wonder why are children in the street. We know that suspensions, with the exception of violent offenses, are the worst form of action a school can take in trying to address student misbehavior. We also are quite aware that the federal government began issuing some reports and some warnings as of January of this year to all school systems and schools, providing guidance and warnings concerning excessive suspensions because of disproportionality and disparate treatment. We also know that test score gains have been minimal, and our data indicate that not only are they minimal, but they are significantly behind the state average and behind that of IPS. In fact, before this meeting is over, with the superintendent's permission, we do have some data we would like to share with the board, and we should be able to have that available before the meeting is over. With high mobility for students who are already behind, patience, and we've heard patience. Patience for 5 years is not a reality and does not identify this as a crisis, the crisis that it is. The students need emergency, urgent action. They need more than words of autonomy and flexibility that are used in contracts for all schools. We recognize that, but we are in a case of emergency. So we are asking that the points that were listed by the other speakers be considered when you are evaluating the turnaround process, looking at the contracts and the performance frameworks. So again, we appreciate your attention, and we appreciate your listening, and we appreciate the hard work that you do for our children in this state. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Can I just make a quick point?
You may, Gordon.
First of all, thank you for your presentation and testimony, and I agree with almost everything you said. I think it's important to note that some of what you said as it relates specifically to turnaround schools applies to all schools, and we need to be looking at that very closely. And I think also as it relates to turnaround schools, these are operators who have come in when there have been years and years of failure. So I do believe that we need to give them time to be successful. Now, not a lot of time, but we need to recognize the circumstances under which they took over the schools. And I also would like to note that on our most recent ISEP scores that all 4 of the turnarounds did see a bump up. Now, you may say that that doesn't have as much weight, but that's real data that we're dealing with, and we're seeing, in some cases close to 10% bump ups year over year. In others, maybe a little lower, but I just wanted to make that point. But thank you for presenting. I think these are really, really important issues for us to be dealing with for Indiana schools, and I know that we have a subcommittee that's going to be looking very closely at these issues and how we can perhaps make some changes that that help students be successful and advance in life, because I do have some serious concerns about some of these retention issues and suspensions, out-of-school suspensions that are really, I think in many cases, not helpful to the students. They might be helpful to the schools, but they're not really as helpful to the students. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And with your permission, Superintendent, we do have copies we'd like to share.
That would be fine. Dan?
I have one other, I want to follow up on Gordon's. I'm looking for our task force, this information and concerns we want to feed in from all the groups that have spoke, as I mentioned to the first speaker. But having been on the board a while, I went through the process. I want to put it in a historical context, just for the record, if nothing else. There's a principle of subsidiarity here in the state of how we operate schools. In other words, we try to keep the control and responsibility as close as possible to the students served with local boards and principals and et cetera. But we also have a significant moral obligation, and when we were looking at these schools, for instance, I've heard it said, well, we just need to help these schools more and not do a turnaround move. The historical record will show we put a lot of effort in the schools that we went to turn around. Hired consultants, we sent teams out, they brought a report back, encouraged superintendents and principals and boards to take a fresh look. So I just want, for the record, while we believe in subsidiarity and would prefer it, nobody on the board wants to do a turnaround. You want to keep it where it's at. When the visits to the school, it's clear they're unsafe. All good efforts. We didn't criticize anybody in the process. We took in a lot of time reports at the school and here. And the students in those schools weren't only just, they were going down each year, they were asked for improvement over 6 years. So as we look at better ways and evaluation, we have to recognize at the end of the day, there's a moral obligation by the state that if these schools, after all good efforts, continue to decrease and money's put in and consultants are sent, you have to do something. So the big thing, I want to make sure the big question with the task force, understand the information, but also understand how we got there and the moral obligation to make things better and how do we join hands and do that, because these are real people and real neighborhoods. And it is, as someone mentioned, it's a true civil rights, social justice issue like no other.
That's right.
And it's connected very much to the violence and lack of opportunity. So we have to take data and go in with a sense of urgency about that moral responsibility. And I look forward to working with you and the other groups.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a comment when we get a chance.
Oh, go ahead, Tony. Go ahead, Tony.
It's not, okay. I think I'd just like to suggest that student behavior issues do not begin at school, and they most likely will not be solved at school. These are issues that these children unfortunately come to school with. And if we're really going to be serious about addressing this, it's going to take parents. And on one level, to me, it just seems patently unfair of an expectation to think that teachers and school administrators are going to fix behavior and conduct problems with kids when the same thing may not be occurring in the household. Where you have parents that create structure at home, enforce discipline, and make sure that kids are following a certain amount of uniform as it relates to things in their lives at home, that usually carries over to how they're going to behave and comport themselves at school. Not always, but usually. And likewise, no matter what a teacher or a school administrator does, when those kids go home, if there's no discipline, if there's no structure, and there are no penalties or consequences for things, whatever the teacher tried to put in place is going to be undone. And at some point, it becomes unreasonable to let the kids that are sitting in the classroom trying to learn, that are constantly being interrupted in instruction because of outbursts and discipline issues from other kids, to have their education undermined by maybe one or two kids that are not able to conduct themselves properly. Now, suspension may not be, I think we have alternative ways for possibly dealing with that. But to really solve this issue, I think the responsibility lies with the parents. Parents are going to have to take control of this issue. It's not good enough to just point at the schools doing suspensions. What type of training or assistance or support can maybe schools or school districts provide for parents to make sure that the proper structure and discipline is being put in place at home so we can maybe get some of this behavior out of the schools? But for us to sit back and just sort of assume that this is the responsibility of teachers and school administrators is wrong. This is the responsibility of parents. You know if your kids are having behavior issues, and that needs to be first addressed at home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back to discussion with an assessment update. And so we'll come back at 10 till.